Hello, good morning. Welcome to The Talk. Wait, that's not the right show.
Um, it's live from New York. It's Saturday night.
God, yes, let's go. Let's go. Papyrus sequel. Yes, let's go. Did you watch that, by the way?
I have not watched it yet. I've been
How
so tied
dare
up.
you? Okay, number one, I don't need to hear about you being tied up. What you and your wife do in your own time.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. If that's what you're gonna do on your own time, please, by all means.
OnlyFans coming. OnlyFans coming.
Oh God. OnlyFans for small Italian dudes who look like Mario. Great, love it.
It's me.
There's a online group somewhere that would love you for that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the nonsense that is our show, though.
Yes, we are two mediocre white dudes on film. I am PLD from the PLD Projects Network, and this is my, as always, chipper, bright, imaginative young lad, PJ Campbell. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Now, that was such a warm and nice introduction. I mean, you could have just said, hey, this is the dude who talks like he's Siskel and Ebert, but sounds like he's Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, and that would have also been accurate, apparently, according to people in my bar.
Hey, you know what? That's a very accurate. I will vouch for that. That's exactly. You have the knowledge of Siskel and Ebert, but the delivery of Wayne and Garth, and I think that's a compliment.
I think so too, but it just came from the most unlikely source. You know what I'm saying? Like, it came from someone when they said it. I went, could be a backhanded compliment, honestly, knowing this individual, and I was just not sure. It was just very interesting, but I'll take it. It was it's nice when people actually like listening to your takes about movies. So now I have a list that I'm working on for a bunch of my bar patrons because they like my taste in movies, and they're like, tell us the things that we should be watching. And I was like, how much time do you have? And so now I'm working on this list. Yeah. And
hide 7 drinks and I'll get back to you at this point.
Oh, it's going to take a lot longer than that.
I'll talk about the first volume.
About 200 movies, like of movie. It's basically like if Roger Ebert wrote his version of, all the movies you need to see before you die, but it was full of martial arts movies and B horror films.
That I don't think there's ever been a more truthful, apt, and fitting statement from PJ Campbell in my life. The only thing you need to mention there somewhere was Rocketeer and Bruce Campbell.
I mean, it's on there. Like the Rocketeer is on there. Like Planet of the Apes is on there. There are real movies. But also Maniac Cop 2 is on the list. So, I mean, Jason has a badge. What could go wrong? Like that.
Nothing. It goes so right. It goes so right. Nothing like a good 80s B horror film. I'm still on my run of In Search of Darkness movies, which I've been so happy that documentary came out because I've been watching so many movies that I missed even as a young lad growing up in the 80s. I watched, was it Mother's Day the other day? What a freak show that was.
What a great movie.
It's a very energetic movie. I'll give you that. Definitely a very high energy movie. I'm watching Alligator with Robert Forster now. Oh God, I love Robert Forster.
Oh God, I love Alligator. Alligator 2 is also fun. Not fun. As fun, but still fun.
Yes, absolutely. I remember these are films. Some of them I have watched, but I haven't watched in a long time. But I'm definitely picking through some fun ones.
So when you do this, I know I've told you to do this in the past. I don't know if you've ever done it while you've gone along. Any of these that you've seen in the past, if there is also a corresponding Joe Bob episode, do you watch the Joe Bob episode?
I haven't yet, and I do want to. I know I've said I want. I know you're mad. I know. The idea is honestly, a lot of the ones that I haven't seen in forever, it's almost like fresh watches, almost like new watches for me. So I kind of want to watch it on my own without it. I actually do. After I finish the In Search of Darkness stuff I've been doing, I think I do want to go back and watch the Joe Bob episodes with those in there because I do like Joe Bob from what I've seen, and I would like to do that. I think it's a fun thing to do. I will get there. I promise.
For those who don't know and why I'm mad at him, this is a. We're going to open up the lore, if you will, of the book of PJ Campbell for a second here. But back in the day, Joe Bob Briggs had a TV show on TNT called Monster Vision, and it was one of those like late night movie horror host type shows, and he would do like a double feature or triple feature of movies. Most of the time it was horror. Sometimes it would be like random action movies or kind of like creature featurey type like Predator or things like that. And I would watch some of those like late night episodes with the Godzilla movies and some of the Friday the 13th. And Joe Bob would always be like Elvira, where he'd kind of like pop in and out of the movie and give his take at talking about the movie and the things going on. And the character of Joe Bob is like this very redneck type character, just super fun. And it went away, and then he has risen from the dead, as it were, over the last decade or so on Shudder of all places, where he's been hosting The Last Drive-In. And it's still got the same exact mechanics, and it is so wonderful and so fun, and it fills me with joy. And honestly, probably explains why I like talking about movies so much, as watching stuff like that and at the movies with Siskel and Ebert. So, wow, that like intersection of time, like right there, just makes so much sense now of why I am the way that I am.
And it's not like I don't understand. I mean, obviously, I know you enjoy her as well, but for me, that was Elvira growing up in the 80s. Like, that was kind of a similar type of thing from what I gather. Like, she
exactly
watched it. I just love Elvira. Hell, that was one of the movies I watched recently on my run. I got to watch the Elvira movie, which was such a hoot. I didn't realize how much I loved that film.
Oh, that first movie is awesome.
So
the second one's good too, but that first one
is really, really good.
It's really good.
It's really fun. What a treasure she is.
They actually did that last year, I think, on Last Drive-In with her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's an episode I should seek out then for sure.
Yeah, because it is super awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will do that. I do want to do that. I just want to watch the film first. I want to know the film first, because I feel like I've always felt like watching a film for the first time in that environment takes a little bit away from the film for me, because I kind of get out of the film. I go into the film, I go out of the film. Let me watch the film and go back and see it through their eyes to kind of like not change my opinion, but to offer new insight. And that makes it more interesting for me at that point. So I will. Sure. So that's how we're here for today.
Okay, so how about Doctor Who?
We're not here for that either. We actually have a show coming up on Doctor Who. We'll be able to talk about Doctor Who nonstop. In fact, we'll announce a little bit here. We're going to go a little bit of a hiatus on Two Mediocre Way Twos on Film after this episode. This episode is our last installment of the Friday the 13th series. We've included the entire studio run effort, and now we closed out with a bookend of two wonderful films from Womp Stomp Films. They're considered fan films, but as far as I'm concerned, they're canon, because I think that in my head, they're definitely canon.
Goddamn right. That's why I wanted to cover them. I said it before, and I'll say it again. These are canon, motherfucker.
Whether you like it or not. So we're going to finish up with that. And after that, we are going to take a little bit of a hiatus, because Doctor Who is coming out. The series is coming out on March 10th and 11th. And it's going to be a weekly series for 8 episodes. In fact, the first one is 2 episodes. The first night has 2 episodes in it. So it'll be 7 weeks, a 7-week run. And as you know, sometimes our scheduling is difficult, and we try to do a bi-weekly podcast and sometimes have scheduling difficulties. So trying to add a weekly podcast to our bi-weekly schedule just seemed like it was going to be a nightmare and not going to work out very well for us. So we figured we'd stop after this franchise was done. We'd go forth, and then we would watch the Doctor Who stuff, to our big blue box, do all of the after shows on that. And when the Doctor Who ends, when that series ends, then we'll come back and we'll start afresh with our next series in Two Mediocre White Tubes on Film, which is a special one for our patron Kelly. Finally, we will.
He's been waiting almost a year for us to do John Wick.
I
feel so bad. I do too. So John Wick was supposed to happen before Friday the 13th, and something happened, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but you and I pivoted away from it. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember exactly why, but something was going on, and we were like, John Wick doesn't feel like the thing that either of us felt like we should be doing in that moment. And so we were like, okay, well, we'll get back to it. Let's do Friday the 13th. And Friday the 13th is just so much. That's, without Never Hike Alone, it's 12 movies.
Right.
With Never Hike Alone, it's 14 movies.
Right. I think it had to do with we wanted to do it over the Halloween spooky season. We want to be doing because we are mostly a horror franchise series. We do some occasional. We did Lethal Weapon before. We did Lord of the Rings. We did
Lord of the Rings is a horror movie. I spent most of that Fellowship of the Ring podcast talking about why it is in fact actually just a horror film.
Wow, it's okay. I'm not going to argue here.
I'm telling you right now. Peter Jackson made Lord of the Rings into a horror film, and you will not tell me otherwise.
Okay.
Sure.
Getting back to the point that we do mainly horror here, but like especially over the Halloween season, we want to be in one of our big horror runs. We did Halloween, the previous one, Friday the 13th, this one, and this one we're actually going to be doing the final of the big three. We're going to be Nightmare on Elm Street during that Halloween season. But yeah, I think that's what happened. We had to pause it, push it away, and then that was like the second or third time. In fact, I think our initial trilogy idea was for us to do Pitch Perfect, which we were kind of dreading, and we pushed that.
Oh yeah, that was a whole thing. I really look. I like being as positive as possible while we do this.
Yeah,
I
don't even mind the movies. I'd watch the movies; they're fine. It's just not something I want to dedicate like a whole podcast to for 3 episodes.
Exactly.
So she kindly pivoted to John Wick, which I have no problem talking about for John Wick. But we will get there. I promise, Kelly. We're just gonna have to wait till the end of Doctor Who. Although there may be, might as well talk about this now. There may be a special bonus to Mediocre Way 2's on film episode if we can make some schedules align properly. After last
continue.
After last episode of Two Mediocre Way 2's on film, where we covered Never Hike Alone, the Ghost Cut, Womp Stomp Films, director of the episodes of the films, Vincent DeSanti, left a very nice, long, passionate comments on our YouTube feed, which we were very excited about. In fact, I saw it, bookmarked it, like earmarked in my head. I didn't want to give a quick answer to it. It was deserving of like more of a that's a little bit more
deserves your time and effort,
right? Whereas like usually I'll get anything like, oh, thank you very much, I appreciate your comment. That's kind of sure you can do that quickly. This is something I don't want to sit down with this. By the time I got to it, probably like 8 or 9 hours later, when I sat down, there was like 3 or 4 more comments they had written, just as passionate, just as in depth, giving us great details, giving us great behind the scenes stuff. I'm like, this is awesome. This shows how passionate this guy is. It's phenomenal. But then not only that, PJ, I'll let you tell the rest of that part.
Yeah, we ended up actually we've been emailing a little bit back and forth, and he would initially, because I had posted that we had covered it on Instagram, and they had reached out to me on Instagram and said to email them, because I guess they had like an online raffle thing going on, people posting about the movie, and I hadn't paid attention to that. We were just posting the fact that we were covering the movie.
Yeah.
So I had reached out and I had linked the podcast and let them know, hey, we've been deep into covering Friday the 13th, and we had said from the beginning we were going to cover it, and so I sent them the link when I replied to them, and I was like, I just wanted to, if you guys have time, you can check this out. Like, we really love these movies, and we really wanted to share our love basically with the fans. And Vincent was so cool, and he responded and was like very happy with how we had found it and how passionate we were, and it really made me feel good, because it was nice to see that someone as passionate as they are about this franchise saw 2 people who were as passionate for it too, and saw what they were going for on top of it. Because I know that in our episode we had talked about quite a bit of stuff where you and I were seeing some of the parts differently, and I would kind of read it a certain way, having us been so entrenched in it over the last, several months.
Right.
And then Vincent even said in one of the comments, he was like, I really love that PJ like sees this, like, because I could just really grapple with what they were going for, and I would just lock in. And I love knowing that someone somewhere made something and then saw us actually talking about it and appreciates that we took the time to do it. And we were very honest about our opinions, no matter how you wanted to look at it.
Oh yeah.
But knowing that people that made something like this actually saw our excitement for it is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Because I mean, movies make money all the time and they get rave reviews or whatever, but you don't always get to walk up to someone and talk to them about their thing.
Right.
And so this is kind of the closest in that regard of anything we have done so far, where someone directly involved is like, you two keep talking because we like what you're doing. Like, that's really cool. And it just made me feel good about doing this.
Absolutely. And so when you told me he was reaching out, and he said he did mention that he would perhaps like to join us on a podcast episode for interview. I was quickly very excited about that because I think it'd be really cool. I think that'd be a great hour, whatever, how long it is. Like, we can talk about his process, what he went into with it. We can talk about both Never Hike Alone, The Ghost Cut, Never Hike Alone 2, which we're going to discuss today, the future of the franchise, including some cool ideas we have coming forward potentially that he even mentioned in the comment about putting them all together into one intermixed project. And I can't wait to see the final effort on that, by the way. But not only that, we could actually sit down with that and just talk to him about Friday the 13th in general, because we both
and
be
horror
a third
movies
fan. Horror movies in general, absolutely. See how that goes. I think it'd be a lot of fun to have him on and just have a conversation. Great horror movies. Having someone else to bounce our ideas off of. I think someone like us, he'd be a third mediocre white dude for a day. As it is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's so funny too, because one of my favorite things about him in particular is how, with the Womp Stomp page, he spends so much time on Twitter talking about the state of horror and the things that they'd like to do, and he's very forward about his feelings on certain horror movies or the current, just how it is all coming together right now.
Right.
And I love that. I think that's so cool. And I would love to be able to pick his brain a little bit, because I know that he is not alone in some of my feelings on like things like Terrifier and kind of this like idea of elevated horror. I've seen them talk about that sort of stuff. And I love that he seems like a very old school horror fan like you and I. And
absolutely.
that would be just so fun to sit and just like pick the brain of, because there's so much to be said about horror. Is in such an interesting place right now for so many reasons.
Right.
And I just want to sit down and like talk with that mind and just, pull at it.
Yeah, and see where he is, and as a filmmaker in general, also get to talk about his process and what he's going through, what else he'd like to do. And this is not the last time we'll be doing a Womp Stomp film. Also, when we do our Nightmare on Elm Street series, our watch through, we are going to be adding on the very spectacular Dylan's New Nightmare, which we watched the same time when I was out there in Arizona, and Never Hike Alone 2. So it's another one we're going to add on. We're going to add that on regardless of whether we were talking to Vincent or not. Anyway, Womp Stomp, we actually decided a long time ago to do that. But yeah, I think I hope it's going to work out properly. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I can't wait for it. So that'll be a little bonus episode. We're not sure when it's going to happen, when it's going to air, but sometime after this episode and before we come back with John Wick, we'll try to get that in there for you. Should be a great time. But by the way, we are 18 and a half minutes in. We haven't even touched like Never Hike Alone 2 yet. So welcome to Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. This is what we do.
If this is your first time here, I apologize in advance for anything when you go back and it takes us almost half an hour to even get to a movie.
Yeah, we tend to be.
You and I are known to talk, and now that whole Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert meeting Wayne and Garth thing starting to make a whole lot of sense. Down to you and your stinking Queen hat. So there's a little Bohemian Rhapsody later, I'm sure.
There you go. Absolutely.
By the way, you see this?
That is a good story.
I mean, I gotta say, man, every time that Cavity Colors is like, hey, we're putting out a new Godzilla shirt, and they did one for King of the New Empire, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this thing's the best. It's got Kong with an infinity gauntlet. Let's go.
So lots of fun there to be had. This is what we do, though. We are we like to meander a lot. So if you're into short form entertainment, probably not your best podcast here. I got to be honest with you. If you like to go on different journeys, we are the ones for you. I will say, my last thing I will say, if this is the first time you're watching us and you chose to watch Never Hike Alone 2, that's as your first entry into the Two Mediocre White Dudes franchise. That's awesome.
You are a brilliant human being.
You are right here for us. We are probably the right ones for you, to be honest with you.
Yes, correct. Because now we're going to sit here and talk your ear off about the movie in the best way possible. Because honestly, man, like the fun thing about these is I don't have to get into like a lot of the production side of the thing where I like to talk about the history, but I'll say this. There is a little bit of that to this to me because Never Hike Alone initially came out in 2017. Cut to 2023 when Never Hike Alone 2 officially is birthed out into the world. And the thing about Never Hike Alone 2 in particular is that this was originally going to be like 3 more movies, like 3 mini movies basically, when it was announced, and then COVID happened. And the longer that it took for them to get to where they could do this the right way through COVID, they decided to make a feature film instead. And I think that this movie absolutely flourishes because of that. Because, it was 3 years between 2017 and 2020 to get to Hike in the Snow. And then it was another 3 years from Hike in the Snow to Never Hike Alone 2.
Right.
Now, here we are. And in that 6-year journey, I am so happy to say that we ended up with this very incredible, kind of very fitting sequel to the Friday the 13th films. And on their own, they're already good. But as one story, the Never Hike Alone films are exactly what I have wanted from a Friday the 13th film for a long time. And this lives in that world, as we talked about last week, of like the best version of a legacy sequel, where you're bringing back characters and building off of lore while introducing new characters into the world that, stand up with the characters that we already knew and loved. And I really, really appreciate that. There is so much time and effort that is put into these films. And I love that they love Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Like that to me is they love Friday the 13th.
That passion
is very clear.
It comes so shining through. And as someone who watched Never Hike Alone, when you said I learned about it through you. You let me know, you and Tim Franco, I believe. I watched it and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it and look forward to seeing Never Hike Alone 2 when we went out to visit you in Arizona when it came out. And it is amazing, like watching the progression of the filmmakers too. Spoiler alert, we rate these at the end of the film. I like this one even more than the first one. And that's partially because of the whole anthology and they're mixing things left and right. This has a very straightforward, as far as like tonally consistent, like just from start to finish. It knows exactly what it is and exactly what it want to be. It doesn't have to worry about mixing up things that were made earlier, things that are made. This is all made as one film. And it's for the better. And to be completely honest, it makes Never Hike Alone even better than it was for me by far. And spoiler alert, we'll get into this later on. We both feel, you texted me this morning, that this actually makes a studio Friday the 13th film much better overall. It actually retroactively helps that film out to a degree. And we'll talk about that for sure. I was actually really excited to do this rewatch because when I watched Never Hike Alone 2 with you, I loved it then too, but I hadn't watched Never Hike Alone in a while. So I hadn't got a chance to rewatch it. So watching the two films together now made this watch even greater and even better. Because I kind of like, oh, now I remember everything. Okay, this is all he take. Okay, great. So wonderful start.
It is. And it's so interesting because with this film in particular, the thing that I love is that, obviously when it came to the first half of Never Hike Alone, Tommy is not the lead. Like he's, especially like in the ghost cut of the movie, we meet him early on and then he disappears and Kyle MacLeod, played by Andrew Lightly, takes, front and center. He's the character. He's our dude. He's our final guy. Like he's the one who's going to go into this. He discovers Jason and he's the one who really pushes Tommy back into the forefront of all this. Now, as it turns out, there's the other hiker when you get to Never Hike Alone in the Snow that Tommy has never let go of all this. And the opening of this film is so great because it really spends so much time in the psychosis of what Tommy has gone through. And I love that this is kind of where the Friday the 13th Part 5 becomes very necessary to the movie in a way that I had never anticipated. I have a love-hate relationship with the fifth movie. Obviously we did an entire episode about it, but this movie, by tossing the blue mask in at one point during, all the stuff that Tommy has still, and he's looking at it. I love his wall of following all the things that Jason has done since the end of part 6 with him, like having the stuff, what really happened in Manhattan, having pictures of a bunch of the, victims and from the other movies that we'd seen, some of the case files. But there's also the underlining, everyone in the movie is kind of having terrors and nightmares throughout. And number one,
the theme.
it kind of, yeah, and I kind of love that it's all the PTSD of it all for these people who have been involved, but it also gives a lot more weight to the Jason infiltrating people's minds.
Yes.
And really leaning on that in a way that I don't think the studio films really did a good job of doing after the fifth one.
Let's be honest, they didn't care. I mean, as much as we love, and the fans love Friday the 13th, I'm not saying that like none of the directors love Friday the 13th. No, they didn't care as far as continuity went. It was kind of like, whatever, we don't need. It's just about, we need Jason killing some teenagers. That's pretty much it. Connecting lore was never priority for them. For somebody like for Vincent and Womp Stomp, they really took their big, deep love and actually tried to make these connections work and try to fix continuity that is pretty much irreparably broken. But they do such a good job giving you just enough so there's that connective tissue, because it's impossible to truly connect this continuity. It really is. There's no way.
No, it really is. I mean, you're really, it's like Halloween. There's only so much you can do at that point.
So they do everything they can do to kind of like put a little Band-Aid over it, kind of like gloss over enough things. But really, instead of worrying about the details, they give you the thematical connections, the idea of how Jason can traumatize somebody. And you're right. This actually does not only does it make 5 better. I love Final Chapter. I love Jason Lives. Part 5, I had a lot of issues with, and we again, same podcast. I really wasn't a big overall fan. I didn't like the copycat thing, yada yada yada. But it turns that from a Jason movie into a Tommy Jarvis movie. And that was the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, and that makes the Tommy Jarvis trilogy so much more important. And it raises that fifth up a little bit of a level because it all makes place with what's going on. In fact, half of this, like the storyline here, it almost feels like it's retroactively trying to do a part 5 story, because there is the sheriff who thinks perhaps that it is Tommy Jarvis behind the murders. And that was always the end of part 4, was Tommy Jarvis becoming Jason. Was Tommy Jarvis Jason during part 5? We didn't know. They kind of leaned on that red herring a bit for a while. And they leaned on that more here for the characters, not for us. We know what's going on.
You're right.
We're smart enough to know that. Like back when part 5 came out, we kind of like, you could fool the viewer into thinking maybe young Tommy did grow up to be but we've seen 3 movies with Tommy. We know Tommy Jarvis's character. No, he's not going to really slide out that far on the deep end, but it's good enough for the characters there to consider it. And it makes their actions much more believable than the typical police force who's not going to believe the hero thing. There's actually some weight behind why they're not choosing to believe him at this point. And I really like how that works for us.
I do too. And I think that what's so funny is, if I remember correctly, now it's been months since we rewatched 5 and talked about it. But I think I even said one of the things that bothered me the most is that they really never end up deciding what route to go. Like they really have their cake and eat it too with the red herring of it all. Like they never really commit to whether Tommy is actually crazy. Is it Jason in him? Like they never fully
don't
do anything with it. And I like that this movie kind of finally does that, in saying that no, Tommy was never crazy. It was just that Jason really got in his mind. And I really love that as a idea, because in a world where eventually Freddy and Jason have crossed over, this idea that Jason has a similar, like, almost psychic vibe and connection to the people around him. And it kind of ties into 7 in some capacity, because, obviously Jason versus Carrie is its own thing. And this idea that Jason can now really grab onto people's minds like that. And like lives on through them long enough that he makes Tommy go crazy until Tommy brings him back to life. I love that. I think that actually makes Tommy's story tragic in a lot of ways.
Absolutely tragic. I fully agree. And what's funny about that, what it works for me, we love Jason Lives a lot. It's one of our favorite ones. It might end up being our favorite one. But Jason Lives is a, Scream ancestor, and that is very much a comedy as well as a horror film. It's got like touches of both. It's almost like a parody of itself. Not so much that it makes it doesn't like weaken Jason or anything, but there's definitely a lightheartedness to it. We know what we are, wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the movie. And yet, like, Never Hike Alone is done very seriously. There's not a lot of humor, especially that type of humor in it at all.
No, definitely not.
Yet, it still can connect part 4, part 5, and part 6, which have these different tones, and still make it feel like one full story because they hone in specifically on Tom Matthews as Tommy Jarvis, and that does the work for you. And it's a very impressive way to make that work. It's very hard to make that work without like going, it doesn't really connect. It doesn't matter. The character connects, and the tones can change and shift a little bit. The character is the same throughout, and that's the important thing.
And there's something about the way now that there's this whole monologue at one point because, they do a really nice job tying everything kind of going on within the movies to Tommy's past in some capacity. And you have Anna Campbell as Diana Hill, whose son Mark is the hiker who goes missing in Never Hike in the Snow. Obviously, we know as the audience, he has been murdered by Jason up front. Like, that's how these movies start.
Right.
But they really build that everyone in the town really doesn't trust Tommy. They like Tommy, but because of Rick Cologne, they all really do believe in some capacity that Jason wasn't real. Tommy's a crazy person. And they really lean on this idea that, oh, hey, he probably snapped. So when these people start dying, Cologne does say, put the APB out on Tommy, like he's clearly the murderer. And Anne has this whole conversation, the Diana character, with Tommy, where he goes, no, Jason is real, and I'm so tired of you people not listening to me. He goes, you have to understand, he has ruined my life to this point. He killed my mother. He killed my friends. He killed so many more people. This has been going on forever. He stole my mind. This has been my life.
Right.
And it makes it such an interesting dynamic of what happens to a character who survived all of this, but didn't survive it in a mental capacity.
Absolutely.
And like, it's been eating away at him. The opening of this movie alone, when you see young Tommy Jarvis in his dream, and like, that is how young he was when this started. He was 12.
Right.
And now here he is. He's a grown man who is still dealing with this. Like, it's so powerful for me. And it really treats all of this franchise with such reverence. But to make that Tommy Jarvis trilogy feel that much stronger and to follow it up, it's funny because we had a trilogy recently that was a legacy sequel to a franchise done by a big studio that really goes up and down depending on how you want to look at it. And it doesn't feel like it's necessarily handling it in the same way because it's so easy to just unwrite what happened and just do a sequel to a thing.
Yeah. I just want to really quickly say that series you're talking about also, by the way, has the effort, the added or the additional power of having a Jamie Lee Curtis as the focal character, and she's a very good performer. So she takes up a lot of the slack of perhaps the story itself. Not any mark against these guys or against Tom Matthews at all either, because Tom Matthews does a hell of a job in these.
Well, and that's what I was going to say though, is that I think ultimately, like, what Halloween gets away with is basically they don't tie into anything other than the original.
Right.
And I think it's so much more interesting to take a lot of stuff that kind of doesn't always work together and finding a way to make it work together. And I really appreciate that sort of swing. And when you ground it with a Tom Matthews and you bring him back, and legitimately, I think he's really, really good in this movie. Like,
I agree 100%.
Yeah, like he's very good already in Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow. He is so good in Never Hike Alone too. And that's because he gets to be front and center and we get to see Tommy in a way we've never fully seen him before. And I love that for it.
It fully commits to Tom being the lead, and it fully commits to basically making Tom Matthews Tommy Jarvis. Tommy Jarvis is the Laurie Strode of the Friday the 13th saga at this point. He is the only person that's really been in multiple stories and has made his way through and has really become that focal antagonist. Who else could you point to as being the antagonist of Jason? It's Tom Matthews. And I got to be honest with you, his Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2 especially has really solidified that in a way. I don't even know if it was solidified, because he always kind of was, because he had the 4, 5, and 6 run.
Right.
Even with that, it kind of felt like no one could. You see Tommy Jarvis come back? Sure. But it was never like the idea of Laurie Strode coming back. Laurie Strode coming back was a huge deal. Friday the 13th, we didn't.
It was such a big deal. They did it twice,
yes.
mind you.
Yeah, mind you, twice. Exactly. What I think Tom Matthews does, if this film gets more widely seen by people, by the right people and everything else, I think you could see a Tommy Jarvis return. And I hope Tom Matthews gets to celebrate that. And I hope Womp gets to celebrate that. I'd love to see these guys get an actual shot at running the series itself. Having Tom Matthews come back and be that final character, it would be a amazing legacy sequel, to the point where you could connect everything and still make it work. And that's the important thing.
I agree. And I think that's why I want to give so much credit again to what we were talking about, is in light of where this franchise eventually goes and how many movies exist at this point. But to take the 8, because I know that they've talked about in the past that their canon basically goes up to 8. So they are basically making sequels to Manhattan. 8 onward.
Right. Which is good. Which is understandable.
Which is good. It makes sense.
But 9 totally breaks the canon anyway. It goes on to a way different direction.
Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. But they're doing movies that are directly tied to the original 8 Paramount films. And for me, this is, again, it's just the fact that they take the time, that they're such fans that instead of hand waving away continuity and going, well, no, we're not going to worry about that, they really try to make the 8 of these films feel like they all matter. And even if I don't love certain parts of it, having a sequel this good solidifies my like for the ones that, even though they aren't my favorite, now they have a place. And I think that Never Hike Alone does a great job at finding a place for everything in some capacity.
They really reward you for sitting through some of the sludge you had to sit through as a horror fan. We watch this, we hate pissing on movies. We always are much rather wanting to talk about something we love than piss on something we hate. But when you do a franchise like Friday the 13th, like Halloween, there are installments that we don't like very much, and we end up pissing on them. For this series, it was partially 5 of those kind of more middling, but part 8 we didn't love, and 9 we really didn't love. To be honest with you,
not even really a Friday the 13th film, like,
right.
Speaking.
In fact, I actually, funnily enough, going back to the rankings, I ranked 9 over 8 only because of how many swings it took, and I appreciated the ambition of what they were trying to do, even if they failed miserably on it. But this Never Hike Alone franchise and Never Hike Alone, and this Never Hike Alone 2 specifically, really slots into these films and makes them feel more. Well, it's a fan film that makes studio films feel more legitimate. That sounds wrong, right? That sounds weird. That sounds like it's
but it's true.
Way. But it's exactly what it is.
And I have to say too, one of the things I really appreciate too, I really like how they handle Tommy. And again, I'm gonna point at something, and it's gonna feel weird, but you'll understand. I think Tommy Jarvis in this feels a lot like Jamie Lee Curtis in H2O. And I've made it no real secret that I prefer the H2O version of Laurie and the continuation of her story, where she has the trauma and has grown out of it. She lives with it. it haunts her, but she's still living her life.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the best version of that so far that we've seen in like a legacy version of a horror character coming back.
Right.
Because Tommy still feels like a grounded character. He has gone through so much, but I like that even having gone through it, he has continued forward.
Let me interject something here, 'cause it kind of goes back to something you said earlier as well, but it ties in. What this does, um, grounded is such a great word for it, because it is in a supernatural story, right? I mean, because they're not shying away from there being like this supernatural element, which is possibly psychological. There's something going on there, obviously, but you're allowed to kind of have your own vision of.
Oh yeah.
But Tommy is so grounded, and that's why it makes some horror tropes that are usually unbelievable work. The idea that a
Yes.
town does not believe him, the idea that the Sheriff Cologne, who was there for Jason Lives, he knows Jason was there, is still like denying it. And it just came off like in a Paramount film. It feels like if they came back and kind of like you'd be yelling at him like, "Oh my God, dude, you were there for part 6. You know, this is such bullshit." But you feel the groundedness of it. You know that they don't want to believe that he's back, and that
Yeah.
this is the most logical. This is their disbelief of Tommy is actually the most logical thing in this situation at this point, despite
Correct.
the history of Jason. And the filmmakers do such a great job establishing Tommy and his relationship to the town in that, like you said, kind of, it's not like a hate relationship. It's not like a way where a lot of films would go overboard and go, oh, everybody thinks Tommy's the town nut. No, he doesn't have a job. He's homeless. He's like basically become, he's basically
A
become
recluse.
Ralph. He's become crazy Ralph.
Yeah.
But they don't. He is an active member of society. He's well liked. It's just kind of like, okay, well, he's got some issues, and who knows, maybe this is something that works. And the film,
Yes.
that's a lot. That's a very hard thing to make work given the history of the franchise. And chef's kiss to that of how he made that work.
Totally. And you know, one of the things that's really interesting too is as we talk about this, again, without the hand waving away of it all, but as we've talked about, these are direct sequels to the Paramount films. So
Right.
Freddy versus Jason is not part of that. That's they've called that like an Elseworld story.
Yeah.
And in that, they make a weird choice where Jason is afraid of water. This is a thing we talked about in our episode covering that movie.
Yeah.
It's a interestingly weird choice. This movie makes an interesting choice, and I wanted to talk to you about this. I didn't text you about it.
Okay, fair. Interesting. You can't help
because I
yourself.
really wanted to see your reaction as I talk about it. Do you get the vibe, and I love this, that the water actually heals Jason?
Yes.
And this to me means that Crystal Lake is the Lazarus pit.
I almost texted you the same thing, honestly. I thought
Did you
about
really?
that.
Okay,
I
perfect.
did almost text you that. I felt like that
Yes.
too. Like he feels like it's coming home. It's
Yes.
bringing him, like it gives him
Because
that
he
rest and
directly
powers.
jumps into the water at one point after he gets shot and he's mutilated to
And it
heal.
would make sense because he healed. He drowned, but he came back to life in the water. And he comes back
Right.
to
And
life
how do
in
all
the
these movies
water
usually end?
several times. He goes back to the water and he ends up recharging himself.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, it takes a long time between things, but that's okay. No, I fully agree. I think that's what I'm interested to hear Vincent's story on that, if that's something we actually meant to do or not. But I love the fact that seems like a hearth for him, a home for him in a way.
Yeah, I don't know. I started to really vibe with this idea because you then look back and it's like, how many times did the movies end with him in the water only to be resurrected again in the water? And I love that. Like, I think that post part 6, it makes so much sense to have him ending up in the water only to revitalize himself.
I mean, at the end of this film, I know you can argue easily that it was a symbol. I mean, we'll talk about the final battle in a little bit. We'll get there.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It's a great battle. The ends with Jason's head in the water, and you still get that bubble at the end because you can't end the Friday 13th without a hint that he's still alive. But it does lay into that topic as well as, sure enough, despite even something like that happening, water is his healing grace. And I wonder if it's water, if it's Crystal Lake specifically, but I think
well, that's why I said I think Crystal Lake specifically is the Lazarus Pit. Yeah. If we're gonna go some Batman for it, like we're really gonna lean in on the. I love that though because it feels true to it.
It does, and I'll say at the beginning, I love. We mentioned it before the beginning with the young Tommy Jarvis. Obviously, the nightmare that Tommy's having about himself, and at the end of the nightmare, Jason pulls him into the water. And then there's that great shot of Tommy, like slow motion, the older Tommy, Tom Matthews, going, no, and he runs in and jumps into the water. And this is a great shot, by the way. How like he jumps into the water and he's waking up, and the camera turns as he's like waking up out of bed, and such a great shot, such a great shot. But it actually gets into that Tommy has to wake up because he's going into Jason's world and he's got to get out of there.
Yeah.
Anyway. It's just, I love it.
There's so much interesting psychological stuff in this movie in particular. And again, even in the Never Hike Alone stuff with Jason seeing mom, which we talked about a little bit, and why he sees her so young. And I love that was the thing we were talking about that I started to really pick up on, that Vincent was like, yes, like I see what they're doing. And I think that psychological nature, to your point, is why this is such a fun movie. Because again, it's treated like serious lore and like these things that happened, and they really lean on it and try to expound on it and make it feel new and fresh in a cool way. I love that. Like, it feels so earnest and so honest with how this franchise has gone, and they really just go for it. And this movie makes me happy every time I watch it. Like, there's so many little things too that feel like pieces of movies that we had heard that were going to happen at one point, or like fan theories of things, or just fan wants. Again, we talked about putting Jason in the snow, found footage, Jason in a hospital, like all these little parts and things. The return of Tommy Jarvis. How do you handle that? How do you do that?
Right.
Never Hike Alone films, and in particular, this one, when everything is said and done with where it takes us, feels like the ultimate fan sequel.
Yes.
But in a way that doesn't feel pandering, but feels like a real, earnest, true sequel. Like the kind of movie that if you put this in theaters, people would be like, you know what, man? Friday the 13th is really fucking cool again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people would go, and I think even young people who may not know the Jarvis lineage of it all could still get wrapped up in this story of a dude who many years later feels tortured by the fact that Jason lived.
Right.
Absolutely. I love that. It's so fucking cool.
It is so fucking cool. Let me just talk about we're talking about the opening sequence there. I just want to finish up there. I love when he does wake up and he sees Jason again in his room. And again, have that stare down.
Part 5, right? Because that is Jason standing at the end of the bed.
Yep,
Jason staring at Tommy. It's so good. And it's the first time I went, oh my God, like the part 5 stuff finally really makes sense. Like, I love that I got chills thinking about it. Again, just talking about it, but like yesterday when I was rewatching it, it was like, oh yeah, like I kind of had forgotten. Like, I know we had watched it, not that long ago, really, in time, I guess. But at the same time, you see that moment, and it's like the part 5 of it all clicks.
Yeah,
I love that.
I agree. I want to say about the film, it's an interesting juxtaposition. I almost feel like someone could watch Never Hike Alone 2 and not have seen Never Hike Alone and still absolutely get it. And I think that was that's probably the intent of the filmmakers.
Probably by design.
Because to be completely honest with you, one of the things I mentioned this before we started recording, is that when you have watched Never Hike Alone, it is almost somewhat confusing a little bit. Because it's sometimes the way it begins. We begin in the middle of Never Hike Alone, really. We get Tommy's backstory of it, and we kind of work up to an area. And once it gets to that area, we finally get to a place where they kind of interslate. You're like, oh, okay, I see where we are here in this story. I see where we are in this story. And okay, there's this like mixture of it. But it is a little bit sometimes confusing knowing exactly where we are in the chronology, which is why I'm very, very interested in the comments, and we'll talk to Vincent about it, when we get them on, that they are doing this final cut of all the sources together, including potentially, it says, like mixing Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2 time-wise, mixing them together. I think that'll make a lot more sense. I think it'll make them both stronger films together, because it's not like the confusion's a bad thing. It's not. It's partially on the viewer as well. But I think it could be better served that we see, okay, I see where we are now. Because that sometimes did take me out a little bit. Going, okay, where are we here? Oh, okay, now I'm in.
It gives me Francis Ford Coppola deciding to chronological The Godfather 1 and 2 to get funding for the third movie. Yeah. That's what it reminds me of, but I can't wait to see, like, I'm very interested in this final cut version of the movie because there's so much interesting stuff happening within all of the versions of Never Hike Alone so far that one definitive final cut is going to be so... Like, I can't wait to see them put it all together because you know that they've spent so much time thinking about it.
Right.
Like, since they shot it, and going through COVID to get to this point to shoot this movie, knowing that they could potentially do it, getting this final version and then looking at it and going, oh man, what if we take it and like really solidify it all together? Because that'll put it at about, 2 hour, 220 as a movie.
Yeah.
Depending on how all it's edited together, which would arguably make it the longest and most interesting Friday the 13th film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit longer than most horror. Most horror films are like the 90-minute length.
Yeah,
this would definitely be of the longer variety. Now, also interesting about that aspect is I mentioned this in the last podcast, and I stand by it. One of the comments that Womp made was talking about the first part, Disappear. Which I didn't love that part of it. I mentioned that before because I thought tonally was so different and everything else. He mentioned the comment that it was just meant to show what Jason had become after the original Paramount series.
Yeah.
To quote him, this is a quote from a comment he gave. He said, "A lonely creature existing with one purpose, to kill for his mother, who is now questioning that purpose. All this death, all these bodies, will he ever get to die?" And it's a short music video just to set up the ending of Never Hike Alone 2. Which does work after watching Never Hike Alone 2, I will say. It does work a lot better. I don't think it's necessary to add to the final cut. I'm sure they're going to. They seem to be real like it. I think it's fine. And I'm not going to say, oh, take it out. But I do think it'd be nice. It'd be kind of cool just to start with the Never Hike Alone in the snow and build us up through, and then start interspersing Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2 together at that point. I personally think that's the strongest way to do it without the beginning music video, because that's kind of like, again, it's a little totally different, just the way it's shot and everything else. Not bad, but it kind of makes me jump out of it a little bit. But even if it is there, it's fine. I do want to see this connectivity quite a bit, because I think it's got a lot to offer as a connected film, and really showcases what is happening when, and won't take a viewer out to go, wait, where are we? Okay, now none of that. We are going to watch the juxtaposition, especially the Tommy part of it. Like, I feel like we start Never Hike Alone, we see Tommy's backstory, and then we see Tommy go into it. I think that's going to be the best possible version of the film. And I agree with you; it would be a solid high entry into the franchise for sure.
And it's so funny too, because I just think they've already done such amazing work that knowing that they want to do more with it has me so excited, right? Even though I've seen Never Hike Alone so many times, and I've watched, like, I will watch these anytime because they're short, they're sweet, they're easy to digest. Like, they're so much fun. I can't wait to have a version that feels even more like this was the thing, and seeing it kind of brought together. I actually hope it gets like a festival run, because that would be super freaking cool in a lot of the horror circles. Again, really, I just want Jason on the big screen.
Well, absolutely. It does something also. It does something, for example, it does like one of the other comments that he made that really made sense to me. He wanted his goal, or their goal, was to give Friday the 13th like continuity and story. And it really does with this film. Not only does it take the old stuff and make it worthy and connected, it adds on this lore that is continuing through their own property without Paramount stuff. Beautifully done. Beautifully done.
Oh, it totally is. And it's so interesting because not only does it do that, but again, I just love the weight that it adds to everything. It really makes up for so much of what we've gone through. And one of the things I think that this movie does a really nice job of, to the point of it all, Jason is clearly the loneliest creature who has ever lived. Like,
Right.
once you get through part 8 and the reemergence of Tommy in all this must just make it so much worse for him. Because not only is he the world's loneliest creature, in this world that all he has left is to kill for his mother, because that is what she has said for him to do since he was, reborn in his head. That's what he thought he was supposed to do.
Right.
And then the one guy that has killed him, has disappeared, has brought him back to life, is still out there. And then for him to show up, and just imagine how empty that would make you feel. That all this time, all you've been doing is trying to kill, and this dude is still out there, and there he is, and he's in your place again, and you didn't get him that time, and now you have to start all over. And I'd be a pissed off goalie too, actually.
There was a little bit of that in there. Definitely.
Oh,
definitely.
There's definitely some pissed off goalie in this movie.
Absolutely. And I think the funny thing is, they talk about, they actually make there's allusions to that one point where actually it felt like a line from Freddy vs. Jason about that pissed off goalie. Kind of feels exactly like that. A great homage to it in a way. This is, I love the fact, like, we had the opening sequence we talked about. Getting Tommy in the real world is what you mentioned is the best part about it. And it really does ground him and grounds everything else. But we're seeing the sheriff in his own world actually strengthens this character as well, too. Because you got to remember, this guy, the original character of a clone, was the almost comedic, almost bumbling deputy character.
He's Barney Fife for Friday the 13th.
Right, exactly. And so, like, seeing Barney Fife as the sheriff, it's a tough pull to pull it off with, like, to make him a serious character without losing that quality. And they pull this off in this film very well. And that's a performance thing and a writing thing as well, I think. They give you enough of his old shtick to be the same character, but he's definitely an aged veteran now. He's definitely seen some things, and he's a little more serious about things. Sure, he doesn't believe things are happening, but that's partially because he also has his own axe to grind with Tommy Jarvis to a degree. He doesn't want this to happen again, so it makes sense throughout. I love that aspect of it.
I do too. And again, I mean, it also plays into how often Crystal Lake has tried to change its name or try to cover up what happened, and this is just another step in that, right? I love that, because there's so many versions of the sequels in some capacity, whether it is within the Paramount films, so those canon, or if you want to look at some of the stuff in Freddy vs. Jason or Freddy vs. Jason versus Ash, depending on like where in the lore you look, Crystal Lake has continually become that thing, right? I mean,
Camp Forest Green, they try to rename it and everything else.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
More than once. Mm-hmm. They've tried to cover up and pretend it didn't happen. You change the name, and if you change the name, no one will possibly know what happened here.
Right.
And I like that they still kind of lean on that, because the truth of the matter is you should try to play into the world where if we just pretend it didn't happen, everyone will look the other way, and we just convince people that it's insane stories.
Right.
And I mean, that was the point of that entire monologue that Kyle has about the ghost story. And he's like, all this for some stupid ghost story that people believe, only for it to be like, actually, as it turns out, that ghost story, very real.
Very real. Very real.
And that's what makes this interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I want to give it, I mentioned this before, I want to say it again in a better way. I really feel like the filmmakers themselves have developed with each slice of film.
Yes.
Like, it feels like this film, they've really taken a large step forward in their filmmaking skills. It feels more uniquely them. Some of the shots, I love the shot. They have the two campers where Kyle kind of runs into the two campers, then Jason kills the two campers. And they have the edit where he goes to slice the girl in half, and it quickly shits over to the security guard at the hospital. He bites the jelly donut, and the jelly donut comes down on him. It's such a great transition.
It's one of the best edits I've seen in a while for one of the, like, kind of hiding a kill. You know what I
Right.
mean? Oh,
Exactly
it's
it.
so good. It's
They
so
do
good.
that really well. Their transitions are top notch this time around. Not that they weren't good before, but they stood out to me as how they improved his game on it. It's
That
really
one's
well
one
done.
of my favorites, and honestly, that's another thing is I love that entire sequence with
Yeah.
the campers in the woods because it
Yeah.
also kinda gives us a better idea of what was going on in the woods and how did Kyle get away and get out. And I like that as an addition of, we see him run off and then eventually he's found, but he's kind of having the nightmare sequence. So
Right.
we don't really see the actuality of it all until this movie of he actually finds other campers that then Jason takes care of because well now they are alerted to the presence of the camp and Jason can't have that, so he kills them on top of it. But I really like that. I
Yeah.
really enjoy that addition of Kyle getting away because it just strengthens the resolve of his character.
I can't agree with you more. I gotta say, specifically about that, what is impressive to me and makes that work is that I remember I know I'm kind of putting together a couple of films in my head. I remember one of the films, I don't remember if it was 7 or 5 or either way. I remember specifically that there was one sequence in there where they added a Jason killing 2 campers just because they needed an extra kill. So there's no rhyme or reason for it. They just threw these cameras in. We need some more gap. We need some more death. And this felt almost like an homage to that. Like, because
Yes.
you get to see Jason killing 2 cameras. This actually felt the most like a Paramount scene. Like it. I mean, like the whole film is its own unique styling, and it kind of feels like its own thing, even though it's definitely still continuity story wise through Paramount. This actually felt legitimately like a Paramount scene. But at the same time, instead of just throwing it in there just to get a Jason kill, we get a Jason kill, but then we get it connecting to Kyle's part of the story. We get to actually see some of the stuff from Kyle. So it actually matters in the story as well. And that's a brilliant way to do that. Get another death, another Paramount homage, but it actually matters to the story they're telling. It's a great way to work that all in.
Mhm. Well, and it's so funny because there's also a sequence that to that point when Rick Cologne and Jarvis have their first confrontation again in the movie, it's after the snow stuff and
Mm,
takes place while Kyle is out on the hike. And
right.
I really like it because it's shot as again, it's like a POV shot of Jason watching everything happen, you think. And if you're watching it, you kind of notice it looks a little off. And it's because it's from the point of view of Kyle's camera as
Right.
she's watching it. And I love that. It's a little thing and it makes you're watching it, you're like, it feels a little weird in the right way. So that when he turns the camera and he's talking to it, you go, oh, that's really cool. I really like that. And then, of course, Jason's in the background.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And actually,
Um,
to your point, you know what's so funny about that? Not only does it kind of, there was a thing that you talked about not liking of Jason leaving him alive. It actually, in hindsight, makes more sense because Jason wouldn't want to alert everyone in some capacity that he's really still out there when
right.
you have Jarvis continually going up there. And
Right.
so I kind of liked that actually now, like even in more in hindsight.
I get that, and I don't. I dislike it less. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think I can say I like it
Right.
more,
But that's
but
my point.
I do dislike it less in a way. Also, it has to do with also something he mentioned too. Again, hearing the director talk about it and seeing there, I've always been a case of I love ambitious swings, and I love when people have ideas. And if they don't always work, it might not even be on them. It might be on me. I might not have seen it that way, and it's okay. That's what
Yeah.
happens in art. But he mentions back that this is a Jason who is like kind of finding his place after everything going on. So he's kind of like
Yeah.
not, he doesn't really get his full fire brought back up until Tommy comes back and really kind of stokes that fire. And that makes a
You
little
know
some more
why?
sense
Because
to me.
again, you're lonely and now this dude comes back and you didn't kill him the last time?
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, that shines a place in my heart. So well, while I'm not fully on board, I definitely appreciated it more with this because you're right, that does actually help that out for me. as
Yeah.
far as good. It lets me readjust my way of thinking. Sometimes you
'Cause he
gotta like
leaves all three
this
of
is
them.
film franchises is 12 films long, and even if it's 8 films long, if you're just talking the Paramount stuff, it does change some things, and sometimes you have to readjust your thinking about how some things are because there's not everybody sees everything exactly the same way, and that's okay. As long as there's some reasoning behind it, and I understand that reasoning, I can get on board with it.
Well, and it's so funny because it's a thing that we have talked about a lot in the legacy sequel era of making things. You have to be open to characters doing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have thought a character would have done. Because you're usually with these legacy sequels, you're catching up with these characters 10, 15, 20 years after the last time you saw them. The character is going to have aged. The world is going to have changed. So you have to be willing to meet the movie on that level and meet the character on a level you wouldn't have before because this is not the same character. Like, yeah, the name might be the same and the actor is the same, but in 20 years, 15 years, whatever it is, what has that character gone through to change that character?
Right.
And we may not have seen it on screen, and eventually the movie will tell us, but you have to be open to interpretation. And I think
Yeah.
that's where some fans honestly get lost. And it's actually why I think I respect so much of how you felt about things while also knowing that, like, you are the kind of person like me who is a lot more open to watching characters evolve.
100%.
I mean, it's really not going to be a shock if anyone listened to our Indiana Jones coverage. Like, we spent a lot of time dissecting Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny and why the change from 3 to 4 and then 4 to 5 actually makes sense for that character and where we meet him both times if you want to look at it that way.
And the tone of the films that are surrounding those
Yeah,
characters as well. Absolutely.
right. So in that regard, in the same way that there's a lot of talk on the internet, and there has been since its opening night, and it probably will be till the end of time, for better or worse, is how Luke is handled in The Last Jedi.
Right. Mhm.
I can't help but feel like people just aren't on board with different interpretations of characters. And I
Right.
know that I have even taken shots at the newer Halloween trilogy for that same sort of thing, but I actually it's not even that I take shots at it for it. I actually just think it's almost a disservice to Lori as a character to make her feel so reclusive.
Right. Well,
Because it just I don't know, it makes her feel less strong in some capacity that it let her fall apart that way. But it's also a very honest and true take on that character that could have happened.
and
And
that's why
I
you were
totally
open
get
enough
that.
to it, and you went through it, and you were
Right.
fine. Like, we could argue, and we talk about this all. We've mentioned this a billion times, but since not everybody watches all our episodes, we will throw our little a theory, our own personal thing that we should have had Halloween Ends be the first film of the trilogy. And
Yes.
that would be exactly a great place where Jamie or Laurie Strode could have opened up that whole character as the Susie Homemaker who has probably gotten over the trauma from 40 years ago and how then Halloween Kills happens and then in Halloween 2018 that's when she becomes a super recluse because it's a more recent trauma combined with the previous trauma. Um,
Yeah.
that's a whole other podcast. We'll have that another day.
Yeah, literally, we've done that
Yeah,
podcast. It's
exactly.
the Halloween Ends podcast.
That's right.
But my point is that
But
in
yeah, go
that
ahead.
with Jason, you're doing something a little different, and they're actually giving this character an arc of what happens when he has come back to the lake, and he's starting to realize, like, is this who he is?
Right.
Could he have been more? Is this wrong? And I know that that's such a weird thing to think, but Jason is still a character. Like,
Yeah.
we have to remember, Jason is still a character who, when this started, he was still a man. Like, he was not dead yet. Like, well, maybe, but not really. Like, he
Right.
wasn't a zombie. He wasn't this mutated creature version that would have come out of the sludge post 8. Now he is. And he's gone through all that. He's done all this murder. He's done all this killing. What does that do to that character? And I like that this is asking the audience to look at Jason a little differently. And that's interesting. And you have to be able to dial into that. And if you can get on board, it's kind of interesting.
I mean, I would argue that Jason was not really a character for a long time. He was
Right.
basically a force of evil. That was it. He was let's face it, he was the rip-off Michael Myers. And the only thing that would have made it more closely Michael Myers if they had found like a Leonard Nimoy mask to wear instead of a goalie mask.
Could you imagine?
Jason
now I want an entire universe where Jason wears a Spock mask instead, and he paints it white.
I would love that so much. I'm here for it. But he was just kind of like, here's your insert death machine here. And I think honestly, until these films, he was that way. And I think that's why initially I was kind of resistant to his journey, because I never really ventured farther into him as a character that way. But watching this again, seeing that is like, okay, let me take a shift back and let me take a look at it from that side. And it makes a lot more sense that way. And it's something that he absolutely deserves. He deserves to get that kind of story. And you could do it in a way that doesn't ruin the evil force. And I think Never Hike Alone perfectly does that. There's a way you could do it, and it ruins the backstory. It kind of like crushes it. You don't want to make them too humanistic. You don't want to make them too sympathetic or anything like that.
Oh, God, no.
But there's a way to make it work. Like, oh, okay, this is a real character with real evolution, and they give you that in this film, which I really appreciate, and even more so in this one than in the original one. I think they do a better job depicting it in this film. Like I said, I keep saying it, I really like this one even better than the first Never Hike Alone, because I really feel like it's almost like they were warming up a little bit with Never Hike Alone. And that sounds negative, but it's not. It just feels like they really found their groove with what they're doing in this one and this part of them. So.
Oh, I completely agree, because it's like anything else, right? The more you make a thing, the better at it you become, because you hone certain things and you learn from your mistakes of whatever, and you find new ways to do stuff.
You get inspired to go further in things, and I would go a little bit further down this road, a little bit further down that road.
And you know what? Considering the fact that over the campaigns of these movies, they got enough people to help fund them that believed in that version and that vision, it tells me we are not the only ones who really appreciate what Womp Stomp was doing and see the potential of what this franchise is, and
100%.
Especially under them. And so in that regard, I have to give them so much credit for the entire sequence set in the hospital. And this movie does the thing that a lot of us have wanted, which is take Jason out of the woods, even for a little bit. Yes. Let him live in a world where the world is happening around him, because we don't get a ton of that, right? Takes Manhattan is the closest we have to that. And I still think, again, the unfortunate side effect of that budget being cut so much, it really doesn't do as much with it as it could.
It doesn't at all. We that was part of our whole podcast of it, that it was a missed opportunity for sure.
It is. And so the fact that we have an entire sequence of Jason murdering people in a hospital, number one, what a great homage to the fact that they were going to do that in the past and it didn't happen. But even more so, it's actually stylistically super interesting. It's done in a way that forces a character who genuinely didn't want to believe that Jason was back and must face that, watches the horrors unleashed, while another character who knows exactly what's about to happen goes, we got to get the fuck out of here. Get as far away from this as possible. And I love the sequence too, because that bleak red lighting, the way that they do it, it's just so powerful.
Oh, if we're gonna get into that now, let's get into the red lighting and the hospital showdown. I mean, I agree with you by the way, the hospital thing, because that was obviously it goes from someone who is a fan. They know that initially at one point, Friday the 13th Part 3 was supposed to be in a hospital, and they decided to go that route. Would have been very cool to see Jason in hospital. Well, now we get to see it, and my God, the whole thing leading up to it, from the moment Tommy and Kyle and I'm sorry, the mother
Diana
get down in the elevator, and the elevator opens, and there's Sheriff Cologne with his red light. You bang on them, ready to go, and they're about to. Kyle even comes forward and says, "He's real, dude. He's real." Do you have the cop out there going, "There's somebody vandalizing cars out here"? What a great way to talk about Jason.
God, it's so good.
He's
then vandalizing cars.
Stop him! What's going on? What is happening? Boom! Red lights happen. You're like, oh, fuck, something's going down now, and I can't
God,
wait
the
for it.
Jason shadow walking across is one of the coolest. Like, it makes me so happy with
So
that red
good.
lighting and the way he walks. Like, just seeing the silhouette on the.
Yes.
It's
What
so
a
good.
great shot. What a great shot. And then of course it goes even further as we get to the point where like he brings the head in. He brings the head in, the severed head of the cop out there. And
Yep.
we're jumping forward for a lot of things, but this is I can't not jump forward. It's just an amazing step of like finally seeing it's one of those moments you look for in a movie too. Sheriff Cologne seeing Jason and being like, oh shit, I was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
My bad.
Well, and one of my favorite things about it is as the sequence plays out, they have this great like shot where the camera is sitting on Vincent Gastafero's face,
Mhm.
and you see him standing there as Jason also at the other end of the hall grabs that nurse and he splits her open with the
Eviscerates
sight.
her. Oh,
And you
that's a
watch his
poster
face
moment, by the
drop.
way. That's a
Yes, it is.
poster moment. Like that is such a great shot.
It's
That
one of
legitimately,
this
in the
legitimately
franchise,
is a top 3 kill in the series for me. Because
hundred
then there's
percent.
the shot of Jason holding her with the innards just out. It is awesome. It is a great shot, and Rick is watching this, and then one nurse goes running by, and Jason takes the scythe and he just throws it, and you watch it go across, and he's still just, this is really happening. It's
Yeah,
really happening. Like, what the fuck? This is
yeah.
really happening.
This is more than I can handle at this point. And you get to see some of that cop shot footage, by the way, the body
Yeah.
cam shot again, which I loved in the first one. Is my favorite parts of the first one too. Works just as well.
Oh,
So
it's so good. Well, especially when Cologne runs up to you and or the camera rather, but it feels like you and he's like, "Get out of here. What are you doing? Get out of here." Like, it's so good.
yeah, like it's like basically like I can't handle it. I'm your sheriff and I'm here. I'm telling you, you better run. I love, by the way, specifically, I want to point out, we haven't talked about him much. Vincent actually plays Jason. He does it with his partner. I wish I had it off the top of my head who his partner was that he also played it. But
Brian Forrest.
that's it. And he does that a lot. But he plays most according in our comments. He mentioned specifically that he did that he was playing Jason in Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2. And it is, oh God, he knows Jason. And like it was that going back to that image we talked about with the evisceration of the nurse. You see her innards drop out. You see everybody horrified. You see Jason looking down at her, and he just does this like his head
Yeah.
tilt, look up, scares the bejesus out of me. Like it's so good. It's so good. He is a
God,
he
it
is
is.
a he is a great Jason in this one as well. I liked him in Never Hike Alone. I like his Jason even more in this one. And again, I
Well,
think it
and
has to
again,
do with
it just feels
more
home.
practice with it. Yeah, more home.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I love that because this, I think I kind of said it in the last one. One of the things I really like about this version of Jason, it's the same reason I like the Derek Mears one. It kind of feels like an amalgamation of everything that Jason has become over the years. And you find
Yes.
this way to have a performance that captures the spirit of all of them while doing your own thing. Because
100%.
this is a Jason that is scared and a Jason that is worried, but a Jason that feels protective and lost. And, maybe if Tommy hadn't shot him, maybe they just would have been friends. I don't know. But like, it really, you do feel like there's a weight to Jason in this one that he's never really had while he still has to be Jason. And
Yeah.
I kind of dig that.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree with you on that. That, by the way, I will tell you right now, that is my favorite sequence in any of the Never Hike Alones, and it's a top
Oh, yeah.
5 sequence probably from the franchise itself. It's
Well,
that damn good for me.
honestly, between that and then in the movie itself, the sequence involving the ambulance done from Tommy's perspective, and we're very much expanded on what we see at the end of the initial Never Hike Alone
Right.
is fucking amazing.
Agreed.
Because that entire sequence with Jason even chasing the ambulance down and Tommy making the call is so good because you really see feral Jason again too.
Yeah. Right. Right.
The
So
kill
good.
in the car with the arrow through the neck is amazing.
Amazing.
Jason like Tommy shooting him with the shotgun, only for Jason to like get back up and grab him and pull off the sleeve enough to see where Tommy is going, and he uses that. Smart detective Jason, like that's super cool. I love that. It's a great addition to Jason is not a stupid character.
No.
People love to make fun of the character for being really dumb.
Just simple.
That couldn't be further from the truth.
Simple, not simplistic. That's a different thing.
Yes.
Very entirely.
Correct.
Simple. I want to point out specifically another one of my favorite sequences because it's the antithesis almost. It's partially the antithesis of what we just saw. Although it does strengthen Jason up. Right after the hospital sequence, we get outside the parking lot to try to figure out how to go because Jason's vandalized all the cars. And we have this moment where Sheriff Cologne acts like he's going to be a badass. Like it seems like you could have like in any other way they might have given Cologne a badass ending. They don't give him a badass ending here, and it's exactly what the
because he doesn't deserve it.
Exactly, he doesn't deserve it. And so, but they give him like this. It's him to a T. He always thought he was a badass. He always wanted to be a badass. So he had this like way like I'm gonna be a badass. You bang, and he's like, it's like, oh my god, dude, you're such a nerd, and you're such like you're not doing this right at all. And then Jason gets to him, and he has the final like moment of that maybe badass. You bang, and gets Jason right under the neck. Boom, and Jason kind of goes, and he goes, oh shit. Crunches his head like a pumpkin, and it's so gnarly.
Oh my god, it's so good. And like there's no character more deserving than Jason just being pissed that you shot him in the head than Rick Cologne getting his head totally smashed in. Like
you banged.
And my god, dude, the practical effects work in that too. When like Cologne's head crumbles and squishes in like the worst amazing way possible. And I love it. It's fucking amazing. Like that is a sequence that lives rent free in my head. And again, it helps that they really build to this moment where Cologne thinks he's being the hero. And even Jarvis is like, this dude's going to get us killed. Like, this is a bad idea. Like, do not do this. And what does Cologne do? He does it anyway because he's an idiot. He doesn't listen to Tommy. He never has.
And Tommy's like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, like he's so annoyed by him.
But Tommy's like, you know what? He'll buy us some time. Let's go ahead and use this time at least.
It's a great sequence, and it gives that character exactly the ending he's deserved since the 6th movie. It gives us, the audience, the cheer moment. The best moments in horror movies are when the worst characters meet their ends.
Yeah.
Like you feel satisfaction in watching that happen. Right. Like I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Anytime you watch a horror movie, isn't it just feel good when the worst character gets the best comeuppance?
Let's be honest, like this says something about human nature, but it's a visceral thing for us. When we have a bad person in real life that deserves karma put on them, we really don't wish them dead because we're good people. Nobody wants anybody to die. But in this case, it's a fictional character, and it's like cathartic for us. We're like, yeah, smash that fucker's head in like a pumpkin.
I mean, honestly, it's the one thing that Joker does right.
Yeah.
Because Robert De Niro's character is fucking terrible. Like he's a very irritating human being.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets shot, there's a sense of catharsis that feels strangely good, even if it's happening live on television. Like you feel something.
Right.
That is what this moment feels like to me. But in like we've waited so long to see this dude get his comeuppance, and it finally happens. And I couldn't be happier about it. Like,
same.
And again, it's because these guys are fans. They know. And the whole him pointing at the light at him and the bang at Jason is comical. Like, it's just, come on. You had to know they were going to do it, and it works.
Absolutely.
Well, and we have to say, I mean, like, Cologne is built as a character over these as well, and he even has his own nightmare sequence. And I have to say, what's so interesting is that it's clear that this is all messing with all of them because Kyle has his also in the movie. But the interesting thing is Cologne's is the living rent-free of he still believes Tommy is Jason.
Right.
And I think that's such an interesting feel because it shows that everyone who has come into contact with Jason in some capacity lives with Jason as PTSD, but it manifests itself differently. And he so badly wants to believe that it's still Tommy because he's been looking at everything on his desk. Love that as a building moment. I think it's so cool.
I fully agree with that. Yeah, I like that he gets it. Well, the whole thing is about nightmare sequences anyway, right? I mean, it's the whole story, the ghost sequence about getting people's heads, and Jason has been in his head. Even in Diana's head, it's more about her son dying. She doesn't really know Jason at that point, but she has her own nightmare sequences. She has her own ghosts of her own head kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I love watching those sequences for sure. But yeah, it is good to see him get his just deserves before we get into the final confrontation back at Crystal Lake, where we deserve to happen. We love seeing Jason outside in the hospital, but at the end, you got to bring him back to the lake for the final confrontation.
I mean, like, look, the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic, which I've talked about ad nauseum on here, I feel like, because I have so much reverence for it as a work of art in this series, does the same thing. Most of it's set in Crystal Lake area, a lot of it in an S-Mart at one point. It kind of takes them into houses and things like that. But where is the final confrontation? You got to have it back at Crystal Lake. Now, that one was cool because it was the frozen Crystal Lake. So it happens on the ice and it's badass as hell. But like, you have to go back at one point. Like, you got to end it at Crystal Lake.
Yeah, 100%, and it does it very well. And we have, we have the Jason versus Scott, versus Scott. Where does Scott come from? Jason versus Kyle before from Never Hike Alone. Having Tommy there with him, it just adds a lot more to that final confrontation. And seeing them work together is wonderful. I gotta say, one thing that improved for me on the second viewing, and it has to do with what we said before about learning to see evolutions of things and learning to see continuity of things. I love the idea that they introduce the lore of the mother's head being like this powerful token, this powerful omen. And I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't love that. It just felt like I was like, is that too easy of a way to do it? It kind of connecting Tommy with the stuff that happened before Tommy. And I wasn't sure. But going back, I realized that watching the second time through, it worked so much better for me because I realized how much that tying Tommy into the pre-Tommy lore means something to this, what they're trying to do with continuity story-wise. And Jason's head Pamela's head has always been a totem for Jason. So it has to have some kind of mythological state. And we just didn't know the length of the mythological state. For us in the Paramount era, it was more about just, okay, Jason's crazy and he's just worshiping his mother's head. But giving him the supernatural side of things makes sense with the Jason story that we've gotten now throughout the Paramount and throughout now what Never Hike Alone has given us. So it gives it a little bit more weight and factor. Loved it a lot more in the second time through.
And I think even more in the where it's talking about Jason as a character, right? And what they're trying to do, it only makes more sense that the head being like this very powerful totem for him and him trying to protect it, but has he been protecting it for the right reasons? Like, what does that mean? And what happens when you take that away from him? And I kind of love that because, obviously the move being that Jason is also the one who ends up destroying it. Unintentionally is such a brilliant move because it gives this weight to he has now destroyed the only thing he had been living for this whole time. What does he do now? And like that moment of him stopping and realizing, and you can see like the angry rage of Jason starting to bubble up, but him actually being so overcome by emotion that he doesn't even think about someone killing him in that moment. And Tommy beheading him is actually just spectacular. It feels so viscerally powerful in a character moment. For Jason.
Absolutely. I agree with that. That moment is really turned me to that moment. To me, made me like it more. Realizing watching Jason be the one to slice it meant there's no other way that could have ended, to be honest with you. Because if they destroyed it, it just would have been like more enraging Jason, I think, and more like pissing him off. And this way, it makes him actually stop and go, "Oh fuck, what did I do? Holy shit!" and get that distraction to allow Tom to get the final slice in, as it were. And it's the only way Tommy could get to it. I love the fact that even though Tommy is a badass of sorts, he's not a badass really. He's
he's still human.
He's very human, and he's not even exactly a very big, strong. He's just an older human. He's like 50 or 60 at this point. There's a limit to what he could do. So he needed that extra edge of a distracted Jason, a breaking down Jason, to be able to get that final shot. And especially after Hawkeye, Jason took him out a little bit with the arrows.
Yeah. I love that comes back to play too, because it feels like a nice bookend from the opening of Never Hike in the Snow to Jason pulling it out one more time.
Right.
And they lean pretty heavily on it because there is a point when Jason is looking around and you see the signs. One says archery. You just know that they're going to end up back over there. It's Chekhov's sign at that point. Like,
absolutely,
you got to do it. And one thing I'll say, you kind of brought it up. I love Tommy and Kyle, and then eventually Diana being together in this fight against Jason. And I like it because it does exactly what you just said. It shows that Tommy is human, and it also allows Kyle and Diana to kind of pick up the mantle where Tommy will ultimately probably leave off, because he has now gone through so much and he wants it behind him. To have these characters who can now move forward, who can be, should Womp Stomp decide to do more films, they have angles of characters to use.
They do. They have their own versions of things. I love that you said that at this point. And Tommy can still make appearances here and there, absolutely, if he needs to. And he's like the Obi-Wan Kenobi now of the series, the old mentor kind of thing. Especially, I mean, that could make a lot of sense in the world. And you can visit other legacy characters as well. There's a very large trove of characters, that final guys and girls that made it. But you have your own little ranking of people as well that can pop in here and there. And I like that. I like that a lot. I gotta, all right, this I got something I gotta mention. I forgot. I never texted you about this either. I forgot that there was a after credit scene for this.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. But it ruined my theory.
5,000.
It ruined my theory. Funny thing is, it took a humorous thing. It ruined a serious theory I had. And I thought the end we were gonna have some kind of connection that Diana's son was actually going to be the one that was Hiker Man 5000. And like he was he was a young guy who had tried to do too much on his own. That's when Jason got to, or whatever kind of thing. Because it makes sense that he's a fan of him and everything else. And what a connective tissue that would have been. I was like, cool. And I'm like, oh, but if it got ruined that way, I'm glad it got ruined with a hilarious outro like that.
Well, it also leads to, if they do another one, how do you open it? Having that dude be like the first kill would be amazing, because it's a play back to Kyle being like, this is not for everyone, especially you. Like, I just love that tie-in. And I love that is a thing that comes full circle. These movies are so well thought out, and you can really tell the care and the love that's put in all of this to really make it work. Also, we have to shout out the fact there's a brilliant cameo in the movie of Larry Zerner of Shelley fame appearing as Crystal Lake's mayor. That's great. So awesome.
And for fans of Friday the 13th, hardcore fans, I should say, casual fans might not realize it, and definitely like casual film fans probably don't realize it at all. But Larry has been such a high stakes person involved in Friday the 13th, even after the movie.
Yes.
Lawyer, he's been following the Wright saga and reporting on the Wright saga forever. He is the biggest fan as we are.
Because he's a lawyer now.
He's a lawyer now, exactly. He's not an actor anymore. He's a lawyer. And he's the one who has updated us a lot on what the court cases meant, what the Wrights cases meant, and what was going to go on here and there. We're still learning things here and there, but it's great to see him get a shot to return to a Friday the 13th movie, even though Shelley has been long gone. So, but
you're right. He's been a stalwart of this franchise for so long, I feel like. So it's just kind of fun to see him pop in. And, it's just one of those, you see it and you go, I know that guy. And it's exciting and it's super fun. And it just kind of works. Like, it's a fun thing. And these movies are so full of those little moments, man. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a character thing or an actor thing or a lore thing. Like, I gotta say, they get so much cool little nostalgic points for the opening sequence, where there's all the different clips and all the different ways that they've put together the movie's continuities to try to bring it all together. And you see the photos of certain characters, and you see, articles pointing to certain things, and then things that we never saw, but then these hikers that have been missing. I love all of that because
Me too.
it also makes it feel fleshed out and real. And it just shows how much care that they put into making this, that they want it to feel like the thing that you knew. And you feel this just overwhelming, compelling draw if you've loved these movies to be like, "Oh my god," like,
Right.
it really works. It gives me again, I'm gonna go to H2O, but, like, H2O has that very similar opening, right?
Right.
Like,
Yep.
they get there and it's the same thing. You start to see all the pieces as the theme is slowly playing, and you start to see where all these people ended up and how we got here, and I love that.
And but the thing is, this kind of film needs that even more than H2O did.
Yes.
Because this kind of film, it is a fan film. It is not officially a part of the saga as far as studios go. So, in order to connect that for people who kind of might have a resistance to coming into a fan film, let's be honest with each other. I mean, I even
Oh,
to
yeah.
a degree had a resistance in a way. It's nothing against it, but it's like, okay, so this is a nice fan film. This is fun, but really getting those moments where you have the Leonardo DiCaprio meme moment, like, oh, I get that, I get that, I get that, but to also tie it in to make it part of the groundwork of your story and do it effectively is what makes this such a professional feature for me. Which is why it's again a great choice to do, and they do it well.
Oh, it totally is, and I think that for me, this is why it just really comes together because you feel this overwhelming drive by everyone involved to do something that feels really high art and
Right,
like high horror art, I guess. But like to me, it's still high art. I try not to pick my battles on what I
right,
consider high art
yeah,
or not.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
but again, they want it to feel like, hey, all those studio films you love, we love them too. This is what we would do if we had the
right. And
time,
choice, yeah,
effort, and money,
right,
and to really bring it all together, it makes it feel so earned by the
earned.
time everything is over. And honestly, like if we never got another Friday the 13th film, which God at this point,
Who
who
knows?
knows?
You know?
I mean seems like it's going to be more of a reality every single day the
Right.
longer that the stuff with the rights go on. Like, thank God we're getting a TV show allegedly. I really don't know where we stand with that at this point. We haven't heard anything about it in a little bit. I know that they said that writers' room has been working on it and stuff, but you
We
know,
had the
s-
one recent update about it, but it's still kind of more of a I
a
don't
very
know,
vague.
very
Yeah.
vague kind of, yeah. It is
So
Brian Fuller, I believe, from Hannibal fame,
yeah,
which would make that's one of the reasons I am actually psyched for it because I know he's a great creator. So what to say?
and he loves Friday. He loves
Yeah.
Friday.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
if we never got another Friday movie, which, like I said, feels like who knows these days, I can sit comfortably knowing that Never Hike Alone feels like a final note in some capacity on a franchise that I have loved for a long time and really gives it like one final great swing and really
Mhm.
gives it like an ending that maybe, yeah, it's not an ending, but it feels like a good ending at least for a big portion of this franchise. Because when you look at it, again, we've kind of talked about it a bunch. These movies very clearly love the first 8, but
Mm.
more importantly, they love the Tommy Jarvis movies. And to bring all of that together and to give Jarvis an ending, to give Jason an ending, to give Crystal Lake an ending of sorts, all kind of combined, it feels really good. Like, yeah, it does Jason potentially live at the end? Of course he does. It's a Friday the 13th movie, but to know that we got to this point where there is some sort of letting go,
Yeah.
even for Jason in killing Mother, and like him deciding he's also going home, right? Because
Right.
he sees Mother say, I'm finally here, let's go home. And kind of succumbing to that.
It's basically a choose your own ending to a degree. You get
Right.
that kind of way. Like it's the way it's always been. A fan can go look at it and go, okay, I like Jason ending like this. That's how he's gonna end in my head canon. I'm fine with that. But it always leaves you open because you know these films are always gonna go on in some way, shape, or form. Like I know we just said you just said that we don't know when we're gonna get a Friday the 13th movie again. I mean we don't, but I gotta figure it's eventually gonna happen because it's
I
too
mean,
much money to be made.
Look,
at some point.
I
But
agree with that. I'm just saying,
right, it just feels like forever. By the way, I don't want to derail us too much, but I did look up some stuff about Crystal Lake, and this is everything we know about the show so far. We did get an update in January saying filming is starting in the summer. And there's some good news that Crystal Lake was straight to series, so no pilot or whatever. It's got an order of 1 season from Peacock, but the contract included a penalty for not producing a second season. So it's essentially a 2-season commitment, which is nice. And that was the big thing as far as it goes. But we also got Adrian King returning for a role. Kevin Williamson is writing an episode.
Yeah,
which is happy. And there's going to be 2 scores in this. There'll be 2 scores for the show to choose from. Some of Harry Manfredi's iconic music, and also a new score as well. This is the Victor Miller produced one, which I want to point out really quickly, since we are using this as a wrap up to the Friday the 13th thing. I think that's a better thing because I think, honestly speaking, Victor Miller is more. It's more about quality. It'll be more about the quality control. Everybody talks about Sean Cunningham gets the lion's worth of celebrity as far as the creation of Friday the 13th. And to be honest, everything I've read from him, I don't want to decry the man as much as I don't really want. I'm not in the business of doing that, but I just think he could give a shit about Friday the 13th. He made it as a result of Halloween to make some money for other films. And he was very vocal about not caring and wanting to put money into other films. And he kind of came back because Friday the 13th was a hit. So as a way to bring his money flow for other things, he's the one that talked about not wanting the mask in the 9th film, according to Adam Marcus, kind of thing. Get rid of the damn mask, kind of thing. And it's like, do you have any idea what Jason really is? Like, you have no idea, do you? And so having his name
he sees it very specifically as a thing from his time, right? And then now it's all a cash grab. But guess what happens when you take away the mask?
Yeah, Friday the 13th Part 9, basically.
Exactly. Right. And you make it a weird Evil Dead movie that's weirdly supernatural, and it's not Friday.
So I think the best thing that could happen would be Sean Cunningham sells his rights. I really think that would be the best thing that could happen because
I think a lot of people agree with you.
So that's what I say about that. And so I think this is why if the movies have to include Cunningham, hopefully it can be someone directing it or something that actually really gives a fuck about the film, or give it to Womp Stomp. Honestly, give it to Womp Stomp.
I genuinely think that Vincent and the guys and gals at Womp Stomp have created and showed a real reverence for these movies and would do something so special in a way that I think that the Radio Silence guys came on to the Scream franchise. And I think the Never Hike Alone movies proved this. I would love to be able to see what they can do with the full budget, a full cast, and studio backing. Because I know that they've talked about it. For being films that they are, these are fantastic.
Right.
Now imagine what they could do if they had real money and a real and you could fill it with more characters and really flesh out that world. I would love to see what they could do because again, they love the franchise, they love the characters, they love this world, and they love horror films. And one thing I want to say is that we've brought it up a bunch between starting with Never Hike Alone to the end of Never Hike Alone 2 with snow in the middle and all of it. Seeing how far they've come as filmmakers has been remarkable. Seeing how far the movies progress is remarkable. Imagine what they can do then. Because there's already so many incredible kills in these movies. There's already incredible cinematography. They're getting great acting out of guys who necessarily really weren't doing a lot and are only really known for these movies, right? And yet you can't not love that. And I really hope someone somewhere with the rights, getting them untangled, is paying attention to what they have done. Because without Never Hike Alone as a thing, Jason would not have this great of a film post 2009 that mattered. And that's a crazy thing to think about because again, 2009. It has been that long since we have had a movie.
Yeah, I mean, and who knows how long it's going to be. I know Jason Blum has got involved, the potential to have him to be involved. Maybe they'll do it, which wouldn't be the end of the world. I do know he put forth James Wan as a director, and hey, I love James Wan, so
Look,
I could
dude,
see
if they
that
got
work.
James Wan to do a Friday movie, I'm not gonna lie to you. You'd have
I'm
to.
on board.
You would have to hold me back from trying to break into the studio just to see what he was trying to do.
Absolutely, I think he fits it perfectly, to a degree. So I'd love to see that as well. But yeah, hopefully this thing will happen. In my perfect world, we get Blum gets the rights fully. James Wan directs the first one. We had Womp Stomp direct the second one. How about that? With Wan producing.
You know what? Or just let Wan produce and let these dudes do their thing.
That could be a thing as well. Absolutely.
Because I can see a world where that is the magic combination of the talent and clout of Wan mixed with the incredible love and skill that these guys have to create a movie that, good Lord, just thinking about that, like, I'm getting shivers down my spine being like, think of what they could do.
It'd be great. It would be so phenomenal. So
I don't know. It's a weird and interesting world to live in that Halloween and Friday are now moving to television.
Yeah.
And everything about Halloween is already sending off alarm bells in the wrong way. Friday sounds really promising, but the truth of the matter is, it's like all things, right?
Right.
I love Star Wars dearly, but if you're a live action Star Wars, you probably belong on the big screen. You just do. In my heart of hearts, you belong on the big screen.
Look, I love
Jason
Disney
and
Plus
Michael.
stuff, but give me stars.
Right. In the same way, like, look, I really like WandaVision. I like Falcon and Winter Soldier. I like Loki. You know what I also like? Seeing those characters on the big screen.
Fully agree.
You know where Jason belongs?
Big screen.
Big screen.
Big screen.
I mean, as best as possible. Now, granted, these were, of course, movies made on, YouTube, basically, and then got Blu-ray releases, but they have played in festival circuits.
Yeah.
Big screen. They are made to be big screen Jason movies. When I watch these, I get the going to VHS stores and mom and pop video stores and renting them and discovering them for the first time on VHS.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of us see that stuff. And I think I have to remember too, nowadays television is king, and they're being made with the budgets of movies, and they're being treated like movies. And we also have to remember that for 99.999999999% of a movie in its life, where does it live? On the small screen. Because people, at the small screen at home. So I do have to walk it back a little in they only belong on the big screen, but it's also more just
we want
they belong in movies.
Yeah,
and they belong in movies. They don't necessarily belong in a TV show. They belong in a movie. That's my that's going to be my soapbox for the day. Is these characters, this character in particular, Freddy, Jason, doesn't matter. And look, I say that as someone who just loved Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ash vs. Evil Dead was fantastic because it gave us Bruce Campbell back as Ash, Evil Dead on a weekly basis for a little bit. We got hours and hours and hours of Evil Dead. And I'm so happy it exists. But I miss seeing Ash on the big screen, and it's one of those things, like, it's hard. But there's a world now. Someone somewhere has to talk to the Womp Stomp guys. Because you want Jason to be as cool and as terrifying as he's ever been, with actual, like, world building and lore building and good writing and characters we actually give a shit about. These guys get it. And that's just the end of the matter. And that is why I pushed so hard to make sure that when we covered this franchise, we were going to do it with these at the end. Because to me, these are officially canon sequels to the movies. That is what they are, and they will be that way forever.
Just to clarify, you didn't exactly have to push too hard.
No, but I mean, I made it a point that it was happening.
I don't want people to think I was fighting back on it at all. I was like, you're pushing was we should do the Never Hike Alone films. Okay.
Yeah, and then I kept thinking that you would pull the rug out from under me, honestly. So I kept pushing, being like, so we're still doing it, right? Like, I legitimately do. I love these movies. And it's not for it's not because I think that I want clout with these guys. It's not anything
No.
like that. I genuinely fucking love these.
No, I
They're
would pick
great.
these apart if I could. I mean, if I just have to pick apart, I did pick apart some things from a regular Ghost Cut. I did that last time. This one I actually just like that much more. I didn't have a lot to pick apart. I mean,
You know
I feel
why?
like
Because it's a fucking good movie.
it's a good movie. They honed everything when they wanted. They made a few choices that I might not have made, but like that's filming, and that's I mean, it's wonderful. Ended up being a wonderful time watching it. I watched it. I'm happy to watch it again. I like it better than the first one. So this is, I mean, it's not just that they listened to the podcast. The fact is, I love this film. I did. And we're gonna find out how much soon. We're gonna find out how much soon because we have to bring up our rating scale soon. In fact, I think unless you have anything further to say on the movie, we should probably go ahead and start.
Yeah, I just kind of want to leave it with this before we jump into that. I do want to take a moment to say thank you to Womp Stomp for actually, and Vincent for actually like listening to the podcast. He didn't have to do that. Like that was a shot in the dark for me to be like tossing the link out there in case. And dude, I'm not gonna lie, it felt good. It feels good to know that someone saw how passionate we were and how cool that feels. To know that they know people love this as much, and they have to know, but to just have that constant or like back and forth and actually being able to talk about it, whether it was below in the comments, whether it was in an email, it was the fact that they did that was so cool.
Yeah.
If you've never seen these movies and you finally saw them because we covered them on here, I really, really hope you enjoyed them as much as we do. Again, as fans of the films, it was really imperative to me to bring this to you guys because I know that it went under the radar for a lot of people. It was a small fan-funded campaign that got these to where they were. A lot of people may not have noticed it, especially because you have to call it something not Friday the 13th necessarily.
Right.
So to bring that to you guys and hope that you loved them in the way that we do is really fun. Yeah. So thank you for giving us the chance and the platform to do that. Because look, truth of the matter is no one could watch these and we would probably still do it because it's us. We just like talking and hanging out. It's like we're friends. But it's fun to actually sit down and talk about these and have people discover things because we enjoy them. And I like being able to bring that to you guys. So thank you always for your support and for letting us do this.
Yes, and thanks for putting up with our nonsense. That's what I usually have to say. Because we have a lot of nonsense. I'm not going to lie.
And if this is your first time here, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Or don't if you don't like us, and that's fine too. You can tell me in the comments. I'd rather hear that you don't like my face, my beanie, my shirt, or whatever else, my voice, whatever it is. Leave a comment. Let me know that you don't like me, and that's okay too. I really don't mind. But
tell us our opinions are trash. That's okay. We'll talk about them.
Yeah, hit the Patreon link too. You can join a lot of really cool people who help keep the lights on around these parts. We really appreciate your guys' support. But hit like, hit subscribe. Let's roll the tape on the where we're at rating the movie.
We have two things to rank. We also have to rank Jason. We have to rank our Jason.
Oh, I know.
So let's start with the Jasons first. How we had it before. From our least favorite Jason, we're ranking our favorite Jasons in every film.
On film.
Right. So previously on To Be Different Way to Use on a Film, our rankings went as such from the least favorite Jason to favorite Jason. My least favorite was part 1, and same as yours. And obviously that makes a lot of sense because he's a little kid on there for 2 minutes. From there, part 2 for me is next. I am not the fan of Bag Jason that PJ is. Jason, you're next to Jason Goes to Hell. From there, mine is Jason Goes to Hell. Yours is Freddy vs. Jason, not the Ken Kurzenzer guy. Next for me, part 4. Then for you, part 3. Then for me, part 3. Oh, I'm sorry, I take that back. For you, part 2. Then for me, part 3. Then for you, part 3. Then for me, Never Hike Alone, The Ghost Cut. Then for you, part 6, Jason Lives. For me, part 8. For you, part 8. For me, this is where Freddy vs. Jason goes.
Yeah.
Then for you, part 4. For me, part 6. For you, Never Hike Alone, The Ghost Cut. For me, 2009. For you, Part 7. For me, Jason X. For you, Jason X. For me, New Blood Part 7 as my favorite Jason. Kane Hodder, fans unite. For you, 2009, Derek Mears fans unite.
You're goddamn right, Derek Mears fans unite.
Well, since Derek Mears was number 3 on my list, I'm okay with them. I like Derek as well. So with that being said, where do you put Never Hike Alone 2's, Jason?
Gotta say, man, between Vincent and Brian in this, you got something real special.
I do.
Something real special. It's a hell of a movie. It's a hell of a performance.
Mhm.
And I think that this is arguably the most emotional Jason has ever been played in the right way. I think it's the most character he's ever been played.
Mhm.
I gotta give this guy that third place spot. I think it's a really special performance.
So right above Never Hike Alone, the Ghost Cut, and right underneath Part 7, New Blood.
Yeah.
All right. Not bad at all for me. I am going to slide him in the 5th slot, right underneath Jason Lives. So it makes a lot of sense that Jason Lives, Jason Goes to Never Hike Alone too. I like this one quite a bit, even a lot more even than Never Hike Alone, which I had at the 8th slot. Yeah, beautiful Jason, wonderfully acted, wonderfully performed. It got a great story. I honestly feel like if we ever got a Never Hike Alone 3 or something to that effect, where he had further doings with it, that could go even further up the list for me, because it's kind of a going there with a bullet, so to speak, as it were. So
yeah.
All right,
it's so good, man. It's so
let's
good.
Rank and rate the films, and we'll get the end of the franchise. You get to see what our final rankings are. Number 1, Friday the 13th, the original, I gave a 6. You gave it 6.5. This is out of 11, by the way, because we always turn things up to 11 here on PLD Projects. So I gave it a 6. You gave it a 6.5. Part 2, I gave an 8. You gave an 8.5. Part 3, I gave a 7. You also gave it a 7. By the way, I'm going to interject here real quick. It's not surprising. Our scores are very similar almost always. It just seems to be that
always. It is what it is here.
Sorry, guys, if you're looking for very different opinions, it is what it is. Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, I gave a 9.5. You gave it a 10. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, I gave a 5.5. You gave it a 6. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, I gave it a perfect 11. You also gave it a perfect 11. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, I give it a perfect 11 because of, well, partially, I'm not going to admit it's a little bit nostalgia for me, but I'm not going to excuse it.
I get it.
Friday the 13th, Part 7 for you, gave it a 9.5. We both dipped down quite a bit for Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I gave it a 3. You gave it a 4. Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, I gave it a 4.5, but I'm going to go down to a 4. I can't give it higher than a 4. I don't know why. I know I'm going for ambition, and I'm going for a lot of different things than that, but I'll give it a 4. You gave it a 3. So we basically just switched Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yep.
Jason X, I gave it a 10. You gave it a perfect 11. I'm all for that too, by the way.
You're damn right.
Freddy vs. Jason, I loved and gave it a 10. You gave it an 8. 2009, I gave it 7.5. You gave it a 10. The Ghost Cut, Never Hike Alone, the Ghost Cut, I gave it a 7.5. You gave it a 10.5. Never Hike Alone 2. What do you give Never Hike Alone 2?
I mean, with how much I've been spending the entire podcast gushing about this, I think it should be very obvious, but I actually think this is a perfect movie. As far as everything can be concerned, to me, like I said, this is everything I've ever wanted Friday the 13th to be in the years since the franchise has, gone back and forth and tried things and not quite landed or whatever. But this is it to me. This is, between all of them all together, I really should be rating it probably all together, but they are separate projects. And so in that regard, Never Hike Alone is an 11, man. Like, to me, this is what the franchise should have been from jump of the legacy sequel era of movies. And I love it. I love it. I love it. It is everything I dream of Friday the 13th being done correctly.
You know what? That's a great point. I will say I don't have it at quite a perfect 11, but I don't have it too far down. I have it as a solid 10. So,
hey,
I mean, it is what it is. I think it's perfectly. There's a lot. I love most of it. little nitpicks I have, which I don't even think I even brought up any real nitpicks because they didn't really overall matter. But if I'm gonna have to grade it, then I have to do that. But yeah, so it's a very strong entry into the saga. How strong, you ask? How strong, you ask? Well, let's put it this way. I just took our average ratings of the film, and let me tabulate that really quick. And for all out of you have 14 films total. Would you count everything together? You have 14 films. 14 is Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, at an average of 3.5. 13, Friday the 13th Part 8, also at an average of 3.5. Friday the 13th Part 5, a 5.75. Friday the 13th, the original, at 11, 6.25. At slot 10, we're in our top 10 now. Friday the 13th Part 3 at a 7. Friday the 13th Part 2 at an 8.25. Friday the 13th, 2009, it's number 8 at an 8.75. Never Hike Alone, the Ghost Cut, comes in at number 7 at a 9. Freddy vs. Jason, also a 9. So technically speaking, I guess Never Hike Alone counts as tied with 6th. Therefore, the top 5. Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, a 9.75. Number 4, Friday the 13th, Part 7 of the New Blood at a 10.25. At a number 3, actually, number 2, because they're tied. Never Hike Alone 2 gets a 10.5. Jason X also gets a 10.5. And our favorite Friday the 13th film in the franchise is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, at the perfect score of 11.
That is the most us ranking of this franchise I could ever have imagined. And I say that with no qualms for where we ended up.
No
that
qualms.
Makes
I'm
me
excited.
thrilled.
Happy for it.
And I have to say, if anyone is listening to this for the first time and hearing where all this ended up, and can you like send me that list so that I want to post about this later.
Okay.
I love everything about this because it also shows that we are fans of very different parts of the franchise in the best ways. Like the fact that Never Hike Alone 2, Jason Lives, and Jason X can all live in that like world together in the top 3 is just bonkers. And I love that. Like it is so exactly why we are 2 mediocre white dudes on film.
Yes,
because
indeed.
it is. It's just true. And it's what we love, man. And it makes me happy. So goodness.
Greatness.
I gotta say, man, once again, these movies you cannot sleep on them. If you like Friday the 13th, this is why. Never Hike Alone 2 is tied for 2nd in an official ranking of this franchise of this podcast. That is insane.
That is absolutely bonkers, and I'm here for it. I wish I could say anything further, but my God, it makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, I just emailed it over to your emails, so you can go ahead and do with it as you will. This is going to come out later today, a few hours as it gets uploaded and processed. I'm so excited about it. We got over 2 hours on Never Hike Alone 2. That says something here.
And I think it's about 4 hours between the two combined, which is like much longer than both of those movies, which I think is so funny.
I love it.
But again, it's just, you come to hang out and hear us talk about why we love movies. That's why we do this. And I love believing that the fact that we do podcasts that are much longer than the movies sometimes with this much love and drive,
right,
is part of why you guys keep coming back, because we just genuinely love this stuff. And I gotta say, over these last 2 podcasts, I have to give us a little bit of credit. I think this is the first time in a long time that you and I have not at all like deviated from wanting to talk about the thing. That is unusual for us.
Yeah. That's very true. It's a very true statement. We had a little bit of beginning where we got into it. Before that, as soon as we got into the film itself, it was pretty much all film. So a little bit of Friday the 13th stuff, but that makes sense. I can't wait. I can't wait for this is exciting. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this stuff in the future, and hopefully with Vincent. That'd be wonderful to have him on the podcast and have his conversation added to ours. And hopefully you guys will enjoy that too. Hopefully look forward to that. But that is going to do it for us this episode. PJ, where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on all the social media platforms at PJ Campbell. I'm pretty much on every one of them where you can find me, and you can find me here hanging out, doing the thing. I'm really looking forward to being in our Doctor Who-ness for a little bit. I am going to miss doing two mediocre white dudes on film for a bit, but life has been a lot for both of us lately. And we've had to, that's why this was pushed back a week. And so I think it'll be good to take a little bit of a breath and move into the next portion, which is going to be the John Wick franchise. So it'll be really fun now for us to do something new. And very kind of off the beaten path, as it were, because it's been a little bit since we've done just action movies.
Yeah.
So it'll be a good change of pace. But
Absolutely.
at the same time, I look forward to when we come back from that and we get our Nightmare on.
I'm excited about that.
I know you are.
I am very excited about that. If we had to talk, I mean, Nightmare was mine growing up. That was my horror franchise growing up. So I can't wait to go dive deep into that. Love me some Robert Englund. Talk about a lot on Review, my other show, because he was Willie on V. But yeah, I can't wait for that as well. You can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. I have a PLD Projects Twitter. I'm so bad at promoting it, though. I don't ever do much. All I do is kind of promote links on there. I might shut it down eventually. I might just use mine because it's not, getting sick of having to do
That's
it. That's
totally fair.
But maybe I'll announce that if I do. But follow me at Paul_Denuzio, and you'll find all the PLD product stuff out for sure. As you have this, like I said, every other week, usually with PJ, we're going to take a hiatus. So probably we'll have the one bonus episode if we can get schedules worked out with Vincent, but then we're going to have a hiatus till July 2nd. I believe it's going to be July 2nd or 9th after we do our big blue box run of 7 straight weeks of Doctor Who, because that starts in March 10th. That's why we're trying to give it a little space so we can slide that episode in if we can. And then we'll do Big Blue Box for 7 weeks, come back, and we'll do John Wick. And then, yes, Nightmare on Elm Street, including Dylan's new Nightmare. And I love all those films to a degree. Some are better than others, of course, but I can't wait to discuss them. We'll finally have our big three. And I think after that, we had talked about doing some ratings and rankings episode. We were going to do them possibly before Nightmare, but with the hiatus, I'm going to jump back into Nightmare, make sure we get that done by Halloween. Maybe at the end of the year after Nightmare, we'll do some rankings and ratings. Maybe we'll even do a big three complete ranking of the big three, so to speak. Maybe a whole mosh bosh of that. I don't know what to say. Lots of stuff out there.
It would certainly be quite the rankings were we to do it.
It would be interesting for sure. But yeah, got a lot of good stuff coming, guys. So there, and of course, a lot of stuff here on PLD Projects in general. I mentioned Review every other week as well with Lego. I talk about the V franchise. Finishing that up soon. Thursday's episode is the end of the weekly series from 1985. We do have a lot more topics to get to. Eventually, we're going to do the 2009 reboot and things of that nature. But it is the end of an era, so to speak, there. Holy Snokes, Star Wars podcast with Matty Gunner every week on Wednesday. Bad Batch finale coming up sooner than later. And I think Crown Jewels, my Queen podcast every week as well. But so that's it for us this week, guys. And thanks for sticking around. Thanks for everybody listening. And hopefully, and you stuck around for 2 hours and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you stuck around for 2 hours, you probably did enjoy it, I would hope. Unless you hate listening to us, which, hey, I'll take you hate listening to us. That's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, next time, stay horror fans, and we will see you soon. Take care, guys.